Thank you all so much. That was wonderful. I'm so glad to hear your stories and how Urban Promise has made such a difference in your life. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Can we give them one more round of applause? Okay. All right, so next up, we are going to dive into the topic of disability access and advocacy. Y'all, Christine just texted me and was like, don't put your stuff up there. We need that. And what I do, walk up here and put my stuff up there like she didn't just text me 30 seconds ago. Sorry, Christine, I love you. So we have a wonderful panel coming to us to talk about disability access and advocacy. Our panel leader is Lynn Kim. Lynn is the founder of Go CLT and physical accessibility leader at Trust Bank. With experience in local government and a med tech startup, Lynn delights in working at the intersection of community, inclusive design, and accessibility. Lynn, are you back in the wings? You can come out. If you like, there's Lynn. Yeah. Next, we have Sue-Ann. Sue-Ann is currently a graduate student at UNC Charlotte. She has earned a graduate certificate in nonprofit management and is pursuing a master's in social work. Sue wishes to pursue a career focused on the inclusion of people with disabilities in the workplace. Can we welcome Sue-Ann? And next we have Mr. Billy Pickens, who is a graduate of UNC Charlotte and has a bachelor's in communication studies and a minor in journalism. He is currently working as a youth outreach coordinator for the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. Can we welcome Billy? Thank you all so much for being here. Lynn, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us on a Saturday. Again, my name is Lynn Kim, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. Today, we have a fantastic panel on disability access and advocacy, where we'll be demonstrating how disabled narratives matter and how accessibility and disability justice is an act of love. But before we dive into the panel introductions, I want to take kind of the temperature of the room. So, show of hands, how many of you have someone in your life who has a disability? So how many of you have listened to an audiobook? And how many of you have maybe used automatic doors? Great, and how many of you are completely new to disability access and advocacy and are here to explore how you can incorporate it more into your lives? That's awesome, thank you. So our goal for today is that whatever your role may be, that you will come away with something. Maybe it's a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy that you can apply to be more intentional about disability access and advocacy. So here's the format to give you an idea of what to expect. We'll take a few moments for each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and tell a little bit more about their background. And then I'll kick off the conversation. I'll ask some questions that draw out some of the high-level themes we should be thinking about. And then if we have time, we'll open up the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you have been thinking about to help you navigate your journey in becoming more intentional about accessibility. Does that sound good? Great, let's get started with the panel introduction. So please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your disability. And also feel free to share something that you want the audience to know. We'll start with Sue-Ann, and then after Sue-Ann, we'll go with Billy.
Hi everyone, my name, can you hear me? My name is Suanne, and I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a fancy word for brittle bone disease, and people also call it OI. As mentioned earlier, I am a current grad student at the University of Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about is disability as it relates to the unemployment sector. So during times of recession or periods of when it's really hard to find jobs, people with disabilities are twice as likely to be unemployed versus our non-disabled counterparts. So right now I am working at the Career Center at UNC Charlotte to try to combat that with the students with disabilities on campus.
Thank you, Suanne. Billy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Can y'all hear me? All right, greetings everyone. Hope you're all doing well. It's a great day. My name is Billy Pickens, and I just graduated last December from UNC Charlotte with a bachelor's in communications, mass media focus, and a minor in journalism. And I'm now working as the youth outreach coordinator at the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, where I advocate for youth with disabilities and help them kind of find their voice and find their perspective and have perspectives on issues that matter to them. So that's what I do in a nutshell, but also a lot more to that. But as far as my disability is concerned, I am totally blind, progressive hearing loss. I was born totally blind, and the hearing loss started when I was 7, and it's a genetic condition. So on my mom's side, both my mom's parents are blind. My grandfather had the condition, and he passed it down to his 3 girls, and my mom was a carrier, and I was the inheritor of it. So I also have 2 deafblind cousins also. But despite that, I've been able to get through life. I've been able to go to public school, and my parents were big on treating me the way everyone else was treated and making sure that I had the opportunities that I needed. And I got through life, went to college, and I'm excited to tell you more about that as we go along.
Thank you, Billy and Suanne. To start off our conversation, my first question, especially because both of you are very successful individuals, how has accessibility accommodations helped you throughout your education?
So my disability is very physical. So during K through 12, it was having access to a desk that accommodates my wheelchair. In higher ed, when I got to college, it was more of having a desk, and then one of the things that the Office of Disability Services doesn't really think about is when there would be socials during the courses. Like I remember last year we had a social for the Masters of Public Administration class, and we met at a brewery, but that brewery wasn't accessible, and during one of my arts administration classes, we would go on these excursions to different performing arts centers. And one of the things that the professors really don't take into account is accessibility of their students, because that's not something that is offered by disability services. It's really up to the professors. So that's still kind of a barrier. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, so You actually went into our next question,
Oh,
but
okay,
that's
sorry.
fine. You can go into it. We can, it was more about how accessibility accommodations helped you throughout your education. And then our next question was, despite those accommodations, what kinds of barriers still existed? So we can do both.
Okay, well, I'm jumping ahead. So, the Office of Disability Services only covers the courses, and it's very academic based. If the professors, especially when you get to master's level, professors automatically assume you have transportation and access to transportation to get to different places. So there's, whether it be conferences or gatherings outside of the classroom, it's a lot of the faculty doesn't take those things into account when they're designing the course. So that's one of the barriers that still exist that I face.
Thank you, Sian. Billy, did you want to share about some of the accessibility accommodations that helped you throughout your education, and then maybe some of the barriers that still exist or existed? Oh, Billy?
Yeah.
So the question, if you'd like to answer it as well, is that how accessibility accommodations helped you throughout your education, and then despite those accommodations, what barriers still exist or existed?
Okay, so you said what accommodations helped me throughout my education. What was the last part?
And then if you can, if there were kinds of barriers that exist or existed throughout that time.
Okay, so things that helped me throughout my education, I did receive extended time on testing, and that was one thing that really helped me because sometimes it took me longer to do certain tasks, especially because I read Braille, and so sometimes in the Braille pages are a lot larger sometimes, and sometimes it takes longer. And so I would receive test accommodations, but one of the biggest accommodations that I received was probably in terms of my hearing loss. So I would sit at the front of the classroom, which was both a good thing because I could hear the teacher better, but also because it kept me getting distracted from sitting in the back. So that was always good. But I always tried to, I use my accommodations. Obviously, I think they're important, but I always tried to make sure that I relied on them, not as little as possible, but just making sure that I didn't put myself above anyone else. And so my accommodations were always pretty reasonable. But early on, I did have teachers that I think were somewhat worried. And when I was little, I used to have my parents kind of advocate for me because it was easier. And I didn't really advocate for myself all the time. I didn't really speak for myself a lot. But then I realized when I was in middle school, I realized that there was a lot of communication gaps because everybody felt like they knew what was best for me. And at the end of the day, they didn't really know. At the end of the day, I had to answer for myself. And it kind of led to me struggling in school sometimes because everybody was trying to find a way, but not necessarily what I was looking for. And so what I started doing, I started writing a letter to my teachers in middle school in 7th grade. And I basically told them everything that I needed, my accommodations. But the most important thing I told them was, if you have a question about me, ask me. Not the teacher, not my parents, ask me. And it really changed the way my teachers and I communicated to the point where I would have accommodations, they would vary. So, depending on the situation, we would communicate, and they would always find ways to help me and accommodate for me based on that. And so, I think that's important. Also, but I definitely think that my thing with the school system is I wish that sometimes people could be more receptive of people's needs instead of assuming things. I feel like that happens a lot. That happened to me all the way through college. When I went to disability services, they said, oh, I think you could do auditory learning. And I said, I can do it, but I have hearing loss. I prefer Braille. And they were giving me exams in auditory. And I wasn't doing as well in those exams I was doing on Braille exams. And so I think they realized that, and they said, oh, let's Braille stuff up. So I think it's important to offer you ideas, but also listen to the person that needs that accommodation, because you never know, they might really know what's best for them. So, I mean, that's kind of where I would say improvement could be had.
Thank you, Billy and Stan. So on that line of just accommodations and accessibility throughout your education, and I know that both of you also are employed as well. So can you share with the group how hard or how easy it was for you to gain employment in terms of access and also accommodations during the job process or interview process, and then what it may have been like for you as you are employed?
So I graduated in 2014 with my undergrad, and it was very hard to get employment because I was fresh out of college. I majored in international studies, which doesn't apply to anything. and and so when I was applying to jobs and I was interviewing, my major, first of all, didn't really align with what I was applying for. And when I went to the interview, they saw that I had a physical disability, and I just knew that it was just game over. So it was very hard, and I actually got my first job was at a my first job out of college was at a call center, and it took me several months to get that job. And getting accommodations for that particular job was really hard too. I really had to fight. I got the job through vocational rehab. They helped me find it, and then they also had to step in to advocate for me so I could get accommodations. And I worked odd jobs and I actually had to quit because it was really stressful, and people calling and just being mean over the phone was not, it just doesn't, I couldn't say what I wanted to say. So I had to quit. And so I eventually went back to school and pursued a master's, and it took a lot of networking, it took a lot of volunteering, and it just took a lot of doing free work for me to just get noticed. And so getting a job this time around was a little bit easier just because I didn't have to interview for it. They saw, people around UNC Charlotte saw my worth, and they saw the potential, and I didn't have to interview for my current position, but traditionally, if it weren't for the networking and the community building, just going into an interview cold, it's very difficult for me to win someone over because of my physical disability.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. Billy, did you want to share about your experience on how hard or how easy it is for you to gain employment?
My experience where?
Oh, sorry. How hard or how easy it is for you to gain employment? How hard or how easy it is for you to gain employment?
How hard or how easy it is for you to gain employment?
Oh, okay.
Internships.
Well, I think right now, especially, it was definitely a little bit harder, but I think that, for me, I think that connections were important for me because at the job I have now, my mom already worked there, and I had done work for them before, so I was definitely blessed in that department. But I think that it definitely can be hard because you have not just for me, but I know people that have a lot of skills and a lot of gifts, but may not get into major corporations or places they want to get into because people might discriminate against them or see them and say, oh, they have a disability, they can't. How could they do this and do that? And so I think there's definitely a lot of progress to be had. And one of the things I've been doing is, and I know Suan's doing this as well, is reaching out to people, different corporations, and having those conversations. Because I think that there's a lot of talent, and I think there's a lot of gifts that people have, but it's important for people to reach out and seek that out. And it's for people to realize that when they see talent, they shouldn't just look at someone and say, oh, you have a disability, you can't do this, and actually look at what they can bring to the table. And so I think that could be the most difficult thing. And it also, I've had people, because I know for me personally, I've always said, oh, I want to be in the entertainment industry, and I want to do podcasting and things like that. And people were like, because I would tell people, oh, I'm going to be on the Ellen DeGeneres show one day. And they'd be like, let's take that down a bit. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But some people might underestimate you because you have a disability or because you're maybe in a place where you don't have as many opportunities. And so it's important, and I tell people all the time, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to other people. There's nothing wrong with using Division of Services for the Blind or Disability Services or any outlet you have, but it's important that you also take that initiative and let people know what you're capable of, and hopefully they see your talent and see where what you can do. But I think that there's it's definitely a process, definitely something that is happening over time and growing over time. So that it's definitely growing, but I think change could be had also.
Thank you for that. And I guess in line of that, what are some things that you feel like you would want to change to make life better for people with disabilities? We can start with Billy. If you would like to share, what would you like to change to make life better for people with disabilities?
What would you change to make life better for people with disabilities?
I would definitely make life more inclusive. That's one thing that I think that's kind of the biggest goal that I have now, the biggest thing that I'm doing right now with my job at Exceptional Children's and being the youth outreach coordinator is making sure that people with disabilities have a voice. And one thing that we started doing is we created a newsletter, and it's called YEP, for Young Exceptional Perspectives. And the purpose of the newsletter is to reach out to youth with disabilities. It's made by Youth for You. Our first newsletter started with our youth leadership team, which I'm on, and then it's other youth with disabilities. And they can do anything. Some people wrote blogs about their daily life experiences. Some people made videos. One person made a video about her experience with virtual learning. But the whole idea is both to have fun and to create, to have a place for you to express their talents and gifts and outlets and things like that. But it's also to allow you to use their voice and feel included in conversation. And so my biggest goal is to uplift youth and uplift just people in general with disabilities and make sure that they're included in the conversation, because so many times people talk, but yet they seem to fail to maybe include people that have disabilities. So my biggest goal is to make sure those voices are at the forefront of the conversation also, in terms of things that could change. And also because not everyone, I think that we're not monolithic in terms of the way we view things. A lot of people live their lives differently. Like, Sue-Ann and I agree on a lot, but we also probably have differences in the way that we do things. So that's why it's important to have all voices at the table and all hands on deck in terms of really creating a more diverse and inclusive community for everyone.
Thank you, Billy. Sue-Ann, now I would like to ask you that same question. What would you change to make life better for people with disabilities?
If I had the power which I don't, I would change people's attitudes. Thank you. But on a more practical level, I think disability should be woven into the education system. I think because in public school, disability is so segregated, and even like in my program, I see so many people with disabilities going into social work, which wasn't my intention at all. I grew up just hating social workers, but here I am. And so we just see people with disabilities going into certain professions because there's opportunities available, whereas there should be more people with disabilities in, the sciences, the STEMs. I was in a workshop last week, and there was this lady that was talking about how she's in geosciences, and there's absolutely no one with a physical disability in her field, because that field, you have to go on these excursions in the wilderness, and that's just very exclusive. So I think education of the faculty, education of children in kindergarten, and just having it just embedded into the course, and just have it embedded into everyday life, so it's not tabooed. So when kids see people in wheelchairs, they don't stare because that's common. So that's one thing I would change.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. On that note, we'll take a couple minutes to open the floor up to any questions.
Hi, thanks so much. We have a couple of questions from our audience. The first question is, I'm new to learning about disability access and advocacy. This is a basic question, but is differently abled offensive versus the word disabled? What is the language? Sue-Ann?
So I love this question, thank you. So differently abled, okay, so we don't say differently raced. We don't say differently ethnic, right? Saying differently abled is to say that people with disabilities are on an equal playing field as their non-disabled counterparts, which is not true. This world is not built for people who are disabled. This world is built for people who are able-bodied. To say something is differently abled, or to say someone is differently abled, yes, we all have different abilities. We all have different talents that we bring to the table, but that doesn't mean that one talent or one ability is above the other. They're equal, they're diverse, but with disability, it is marginalized. It's considered marginalization because the access is not the same. Does that make sense?
Okay. So what I hear you saying, Sue-Ann, is like when we use the term differently abled, and honestly, I'm sitting here, I'm like, did I pray that earlier today? I think I did. Dang, Sue-Ann, you just got me. Okay, so disabled, because like differently abled maybe like draws attention away from the issues of accessibility.
Yes.
Because, okay, all right, we hear you. Thank you. Okay. I hope you weren't here when I did that. Now I'm embarrassed. Okay. Billy, do you want to add on to that, or?
What was the question?
What, the question was the term differently abled versus disability. How do you feel about that?
Me personally, I prefer disability because I feel like differently abled is kind of it. It's fine. Like I wouldn't get if somebody said yeah, I'm differently able, I wouldn't get offended. I'm more intent versus way certain thing is said versus what is said, but I don't think that entails who I am necessarily because I have the ability to do a lot of what everybody else does with or without a disability. So I think differently abled is implying, at least to me, in my head, it's implying, oh, you have different abilities than the other person, which, maybe I do things differently, but I don't do different things necessarily. So, not necessarily true. And so for me, I think disability is just, it's a more direct word at, what I'm actually experiencing and where I'm at. It's just like, I was actually just having a conversation with Suanne a couple days ago about blind versus hard of seeing. If Suanne wouldn't mind me sharing our conversation about that. But yeah, we were talking about being blind and hard of seeing, and I was saying, because she was saying, how would it be if I called hard of seeing versus blind? And I was saying that hard of seeing doesn't necessarily, hard of hearing actually implies what I actually am, which is hard of hearing, progressive hearing loss. But I'm totally blind with no vision whatsoever. So hard of seeing would imply that I have sight. So I think that when you're thinking about technically, my head disability just fits better differently able because I actually have the similar abilities to what other people have. So that's just my take on it. But I wouldn't be offended either way.
That's good. That's good. Have you all experienced, or what have been your experiences in regards to accessibility in church?
I feel like I grew up in a Vietnamese church. So our church is accessible, but I feel like the social acceptability and the social accessibility were things that I really struggled with. I never felt like people at my church really accepted me fully. They accepted my identity as a Christian, but they never really fully embraced my identity as a person with a disability or a disabled individual. Did that fully answer the question?
Yeah, it did. I have all types of backup questions, but before we do, I want to give, because I want to know how that, and I'll ask it now so you can think about it while Billy, you're answering. Suanne, how did that affect your faith journey? Did that affect how you viewed God and people in church? What was the repercussions of that? And then Billy, same question to you. While Suanne is thinking about that, what have your experiences of accessibility been in church spaces, if any?
Well, you said accessibility in church.
Yes, sir.
It's been pretty good. Well, growing up, I went to church with my parents, and I started going to church with my mom, and then I would go to church with my dad also. And my parents were pretty well known and well liked in their church, and also, people liked me also. So people were more than willing to be helpful. I think that sometimes naturally, just like in any space, you're gonna have people that don't understand. And so, that was sometimes an issue where people would either overhelp me or not know how to help me. So that could happen. But, even if there was something that I needed that I didn't have, they were willing to accommodate. If I ever wanted the bulletin in Braille, or if I ever wanted a hymn in Braille or something like that, they were willing to accommodate that. So it was always pretty good, but it's a learning process for everyone, and Some people just, they're well-intentioned, but they didn't always know how to help. But, if I was vocal about what I needed, they made sure that I had that accommodation. So that was always great. But yeah, overall it was good, but it was definitely an experience in terms of just making sure that everybody understood how to help me.
That's good. And how did those experiences affect your faith? Either one of you, did it? Like, what was the consequences of that, faith-wise?
That's a very good question. So for the longest time, prior to 2019, when I entered social work, it changed. It just blew my mind. But prior to 2019, I would say I would have always introduced myself and say, my name is Suanne. I have a disability. Disability isn't who I am, it is what I have.
Yeah.
But when I entered into social work, that changed when I really had to dive, because social workers, we, in order to get our degree, we have to do a lot of self-reflection. And in order to help others, we need to first help ourselves. That's the model. And I did so much spiritual digging and so much self-reflection last year on identity and on the disability identity. And what I came to realize was God purposely designed me this way. And He's going to use this imperfect body for His glory. And when we look at scriptures, we see scriptures using not person-first language, but disability-centered language. We see they call him the blind man. They don't call him the man with blindness. They call the leper, right? They don't call him the man with leprosy. So disability is all throughout the Bible. They put the disability in front of the person because it is identity-centered. That doesn't mean that disability is a permanent identity. Jesus could come in and just give me a perfect body and I would no longer be disabled. So the thing about disability is it's so fluid, and so anyways, I'm going off on a tangent, but I've accepted that disability is part of my identity, and it doesn't necessarily dictate everything that I am, but it is part of me. And as soon as I accepted that, I could really accept my purpose on this earth and really dive into what God wants to do through my life.
Wow. Oof. My goodness. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Billy, last answer is to you, sir. Last word is to you. How has your life, disability, your encounter with church and education, how has that influenced your faith?
So growing up, I grew up in a very strong religious household. And, we went to church and grew up in the church and read the Bible. But I think one thing that really affected me early on was I was very independent, where I was told to be independent and asked to do a lot for myself. And I think that also sometimes affected my relationship with God because I think that I always kind of believed there was something out there, but at first I didn't want to admit it, or I was very stubborn about it because I didn't want to give up my own personal freedom or give up my own independence. And as I got older, I just kept feeling Him pursuing me more and more because I just started realizing that, I couldn't do this myself, and I had people that were well-intentioned, but some people who would think that, oh, my blindness is a curse. I would have people on the bus or outside who would pray over me and put their hands on my eyes and say, oh, this needs to be healed. This is all a curse. This is evil. And so I was like, I was questioning whether that was just, humans feeling that way, or that was really how God felt, and he was speaking to those people. But I think my biggest moment was I was traveling, and I had all these moments, and that I just felt like it couldn't be anything but God. And then I said, I'm going to accept Christ and make that decision, and I'm just going to see what happens. Because I just felt him pursuing me more and more, and I did. And the day that I accepted Christ, 20 other people also accepted Christ. And the question was, why that happened. People said, well, we saw you walking by faith because you couldn't see, and we also did the same thing. And so, my pastor at the time, he told me, he said, hey, you reached people I couldn't reach. It was in that moment that I realized that it wasn't about what other people had to say, it wasn't about what anyone else had to say, it was about what God had to say.
Yes.
And he could take, something that others may perceive as evil or a curse and turn that curse into a blessing. And, that was when I really not only learned to not listen to what others had to say, but have a personal relationship with him. So to me, it didn't matter what anyone else said. It mattered what he had to say at the end of the day. And so that made, and I know that there were some people, like my father, he has no blind people in his family. So he said he would always read John chapter 9. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it talks about the blind boy who gained his sight, who Jesus healed. And he was always under the impression that, oh, that's going to be me one day. And it's not that I don't believe that. I think that happened. But at the same time, it also could have been figurative and symbolic of someone gaining their sight spiritually. And yes. I feel like even though I didn't have physical sight, I saw spiritually, I saw emotionally.
Yes.
And so I'm forever grateful for that. And so, I think that once I gave God the chance to come in and have that personal relationship with me, it really impacted my life and changed not only my perception of what others saw by my disability, but the perception that I saw by my disability and the importance of his work through my life and his work through me.
Wow, my goodness. Wow. Can we give the panel a hand? My goodness. Thank you all so much.